The bourbon burned just right as I sat in my basement office, reviewing credit card statements like some kind of financial detective. 15 years of marriage to Beth had taught me to notice the details, especially when those details didn't add up. Lakeside Paradise Resort, romance package, $847.50. I stared at the charge, dated 3 days ago. Beth was supposedly on a business conference in Portland with her marketing team. Funny how business conferences started including couples massages and champagne service. My phone buzzed. A text from my loving wife, complete with a photo of her lounging by a crystal blue pool, designer sunglasses perched perfectly, that smile I used to think was just for me. Wish you were here. The weather is amazing. Missing you. I took another sip of bourbon and laughed. Actually laughed out loud in my empty basement. The sound echoed off the wood paneling I'd installed myself, back when I still believed in building things that would last. Will Parrish, master electrician, business owner, and apparently the biggest fool in our upscale Connecticut suburb. That's me. I opened my laptop and pulled up our joint credit card account. The charges told a story Beth probably thought I'd never read. 2 dinners at the resort's 5-star restaurant. 2 spa appointments. 2 everything. But here's the thing about being an electrician. You learn to trace circuits, follow the current, find where the power really flows. And right now, all signs pointed to Graham Thornton. Graham, the golden boy realtor who sold us our house 5 years ago. Graham, with his perfect teeth and his luxury sedan and his country club membership. Graham, who always seemed to show up at Beth's office parties, her charity events, her girls' nights out. Graham, who was also married. I pulled up my contacts and found Sophie Thornton's number. We'd exchanged information at a neighborhood barbecue last summer, one of those awkward social obligations where spouses pretend to enjoy each other's company. But instead of calling Sophie, I did something simpler, something elegant. I forwarded Beth's text, photo and all, directly to Sophie, along with a screenshot of the credit card charges and a simple message. Thought you should know Graham's business trip got upgraded. Then I sat back and waited. The response was faster than I expected. My phone started ringing within minutes. Beth's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. And again. By the time I'd finished my bourbon, 17 missed calls cluttered my screen. The panic in Beth's voice messages escalated with each one, from confused to angry to desperate. Will, what the hell did you do? Call me back right now. This is insane. You're ruining everything. Funny how fast paradise turns into panic. I poured another bourbon and opened my laptop again. Time for some real detective work. Beth's social media painted a perfect picture of her business trip, carefully cropped photos of conference rooms and networking events. But I knew her patterns, her tells. The timestamp on her resort photo was 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. The same Tuesday, she'd posted a LinkedIn update about productive morning sessions at her conference. Geography was never Beth's strong suit. I started screenshotting everything. Her posts, her check-ins, her tagged locations, a paper trail of lies, each one time-stamped and geotagged. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Sophie Thornton. We need to talk. Tonight. I smiled and typed back, my thoughts exactly. The basement suddenly felt less like a refuge and more like a command center. I'd spent years down here, running wire through walls, fixing what was broken, making sure everything worked the way it should. Tonight, I was going to rewire my entire life. Sophie arrived at my house an hour later, clutching her phone like evidence in a trial. She looked exactly like I remembered. Sharp, professional, the kind of woman who probably balanced Graham's books and managed his calendar and never suspected he was using both to cover his tracks. "Show me everything," she said without preamble. We spread it all out on my kitchen table like investigators working a case. Credit card statements, hotel receipts, phone records I'd pulled from our family plan. Sophie had brought her own evidence. Graham's work trips that coincided perfectly with Beth's conferences. 6 months, Sophie said, her voice steady, but her hands shaking slightly. Maybe longer. Look at this. She showed me Graham's calendar on her phone. Every entry Beth had mentioned as a work obligation matched up with Graham's client meetings in the same cities. They've been planning this, I said, connecting the dots. The trips, the timing, even using your credit card and mine so it looks like separate business expenses. Sophie nodded grimly. Graham's been working late 3 nights a week. Said he was showing properties to out-of-town clients. Beth? Book club, I said. Every Wednesday and Friday, sometimes Saturdays for special events. We sat in silence for a moment, 2 people whose spouses had rewritten their entire lives around a lie. What do you want to do about it? Sophie asked. I looked at the evidence scattered across my table, receipts, photos, messages, a complete map of betrayal drawn in credit card charges and social media posts. I want them to understand that actions have consequences, I said. I want them to feel exactly as foolish as they tried to make us. Sophie's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. I like the way you think, Will. My phone rang again. Beth, calling for probably the 20th time. This time I answered. Will, thank goodness. Listen, I can explain everything. No need, I interrupted. Sophie and I have been comparing notes. Turns out your story makes perfect sense when you add Graham to it. The silence on the other end stretched long enough for me to count heartbeats. Sophie's there? Beth's voice had gone small, scared. She's here. Graham's wife sends her regards, by the way. She's very interested in your vacation photos. Will, please, just listen. I've been listening for months, Beth. Every lie, every excuse, every business trip and girls' night and conference. I've been listening so hard I could probably recite your schedule better than you can. I looked at Sophie, who nodded encouragingly. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You and Graham are going to finish your romantic getaway. Enjoy every minute of it. Because when you get home, everything changes. What do you mean? I mean your vacation just became very expensive. Sophie's already called her lawyer. I'm calling mine tomorrow morning. And that credit card you've been using? The one that's in both our names? I just canceled it. The sound Beth made wasn't quite a sob, wasn't quite a scream. You can't do this. Actually, I can. I'm doing it right now. Have a wonderful rest of your trip, Beth. Make it count. I hung up and turned to Sophie, who was grinning like she'd just won the lottery. Phase 1 complete, I said. Ready for Phase 2? What's Phase 2? I gestured toward my laptop, where I'd been building a folder of evidence that would make any divorce attorney weep with joy. We make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of people they really are. Sophie left my house at midnight with a flash drive full of evidence and a plan that would make Graham's next few weeks memorable for all the wrong reasons. We'd divided responsibilities like a military operation. She'd handle the financial investigation while I worked on the social demolition. The next morning, I drove to my office with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. Parish Electric had been my baby for 12 years, built from nothing into a successful contracting business with 8 employees and a reputation for quality work. While Beth had been playing house with Graham, I'd been building something real. Ray Martinez, my crew chief and the closest thing I had to a best friend, was already at the warehouse when I arrived, coffee in hand and a suspicious look on his weathered face. You look different, he said without preamble. Either you won the lottery or someone's about to have a very bad day. Both, I said, unlocking my office door. Coffee's on me this morning. We need to talk. I gave Ray the abbreviated version while he listened with the kind of attention he usually reserved for complex wiring diagrams. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. So, what's the plan, boss? Remember that electrical work we did at the Thornton place last year? The smart home setup? Ray's grin was predatory. The one where Graham insisted on having cameras and remote access to everything? That's the one. I still have the system passwords. Graham never changed them from the default I set up. That seems like a violation of privacy. It would be if I was planning to spy on him, but I'm not. I'm planning to help him understand that security systems work both ways. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. Graham's flight lands at 3 p.m. Beth. I texted back. Same flight. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. Ray read over my shoulder and shook his head. 15 years of marriage and she throws it away for that clown? Apparently Graham's very persuasive, or Beth's very bored. Either way, they made their choice. So what's our first move? I pulled up Graham's real estate company website on my laptop. His smiling face dominated the homepage, along with testimonials from satisfied clients and photos of him receiving various awards. Graham's built his whole business on reputation. Family man, pillar of the community, trustworthy advisor for the biggest investment of your life. What happens when that reputation gets a few cracks? Ray's smile was genuinely frightening. It crumbles. I spent the morning making phone calls, not to lawyers or private investigators, but to clients. Graham had sold houses to half our neighborhood over the past 5 years, always presenting himself as the married, stable, community-minded realtor who understood family values. Mrs. Patterson, who'd bought her dream home through Graham just 6 months ago, was very interested to hear about his extracurricular activities. "Are you certain?" she asked, her voice sharp with the kind of moral outrage that spreads through suburban neighborhoods like wildfire. "I have photos, receipts, and hotel records. Graham's been using his business trips to conduct a very personal affair with my wife. That's disgusting. And his poor wife. Sophie's handling it with more grace than I would. But I thought you should know, since Graham presented himself as such a family-oriented professional when he was selling you that house." Mrs. Patterson made the kind of noise that suggested Graham's reputation was about to take a serious hit. I made similar calls to 6 other clients, each one carefully chosen for maximum social impact. The Hendersons, who hosted the neighborhood's biggest 4th of July party. The Kowalskis, who ran the local parent-teacher organization. The Yamadas, who seemed to know everyone within a 20-mile radius. By noon, my phone was ringing with return calls from people who'd heard the news secondhand and wanted confirmation. "Will, this is Janet Morrison. I just heard the most incredible story about Graham Thornton and your wife. Please tell me it's not true." "I wish I could, Janet, but I have documentation going back months. This is unbelievable. Graham sold us our house 3 years ago. He kept talking about family values and community trust. We even had him and Sophie over for dinner. The beautiful thing about suburban gossip networks is their efficiency. By the time Beth and Graham's flight landed, half the neighborhood already knew about their romantic getaway. Sophie texted me updates throughout the afternoon. Graham's phone hasn't stopped ringing. He looks confused and angry. Beth trying to call me every 10 minutes, not answering. They're in Graham's car now, heading toward your neighborhood. I was ready for them. Ray and I were installing new security lighting at the Kowalski house when Graham's silver BMW pulled into my driveway. Perfect timing. The Kowalskis had a clear view of my front yard, and Mrs. Kowalski was definitely watching from her kitchen window. Beth got out of the passenger side, her designer luggage in hand, and her face flushed with anger or embarrassment or both. Graham followed, straightening his tie like he was preparing for a business meeting instead of a confrontation with the husband he'd been betraying. I climbed down from the ladder slowly, taking my time. Let them wait. Let the neighbors see. "Will!" Beth called across the yard, her voice artificially bright. "We need to talk." "I'm working," I called back. "Make an appointment." Graham started walking toward me, his chest puffed out in what I assumed was supposed to be an intimidating manner. At 6'2", he had a few inches on me, but I'd spent 15 years hauling electrical equipment and climbing through crawl spaces. He'd spent 15 years sitting behind a desk. "Parrish, we need to straighten this out. You've been spreading lies about Beth and me." I set down my drill and faced him fully. Ray moved casually to my left, close enough to help if needed, but far enough away to give me room to work. Lies? I said, loud enough for Mrs. Kowalski to hear clearly. Graham, I haven't told anyone anything that isn't documented on credit card statements and hotel receipts. Would you like me to show you the evidence? You have no right to invade our privacy. Your privacy? I laughed, and it came out louder than I'd intended. Graham, you've been using my credit card to pay for hotel rooms. You've been lying to your wife about business trips while you vacation with mine. Privacy stopped being an issue when you made it my financial responsibility. Beth was walking toward us now, her face pale, but her jaw set in the stubborn expression I'd learned to recognize over 15 years of marriage. Will, stop this. You're embarrassing yourself. I'm embarrassing myself? I gestured toward Graham's BMW, where their matched luggage was clearly visible through the rear window. Beth, you just returned from a romantic vacation with another woman's husband, using money from our joint account, and I'm the one who should be embarrassed? It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. It's exactly what Sophie thinks. It's exactly what everyone thinks, because it's exactly what happened. Graham stepped closer, his face reddening. You need to stop talking to my clients, Parrish. You're interfering with my business. Your business? I smiled, and I knew it wasn't a nice smile. Graham, your business is built on trust. You sell people the biggest investment of their lives by convincing them you're honest, reliable, family-oriented. What happens to that business when people realize you're a liar who cheats on his wife? You can't prove anything. I pulled out my phone and showed him the screen. Beth's "Wish You Were Here" text, complete with the resort photo and timestamp. I can prove everything. Hotel receipts, credit card charges, photos, text messages. I have a paper trail that goes back 6 months, Graham. Every lie, every fake business trip, every time you two thought you were being clever. Beth grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging in through my work shirt. Will, please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling, we can... I pulled my arm away gently but firmly. Beth, we can't work this out. You made a choice. You chose Graham over our marriage, lies over honesty, fantasy over reality. That's fine. That's your right. But choices have consequences. What consequences? Graham demanded. I looked at him for a long moment, then at Beth, then at the Kowalski house where Mrs. Kowalski was no longer pretending not to watch. You'll find out, I said simply. Ray, let's finish this job. I climbed back up the ladder, leaving Beth and Graham standing in my driveway with their luggage and their lies and their suddenly uncertain future. They stood there for another 5 minutes, arguing in voices too low for me to hear, but loud enough for the neighbors to notice. Finally, Graham got back in his car and drove away, leaving Beth alone with her suitcases. She looked up at me on the ladder, her face a mixture of anger and something that might have been fear. Will, I'm going inside. We need to talk. No, I said without looking down. We don't. This is my house too. Actually, it's not anymore. I changed the locks this morning. Your things are packed and waiting in the garage. The garage code is the same. The silence stretched long enough for me to finish installing the light fixture. When I looked down again, Beth was gone, but her luggage was still in the driveway. Ray handed me another screw. Think she'll figure out you were bluffing about the locks? Probably. But it'll take her a while. And by then, everyone in the neighborhood will know she's been locked out of her own house. You're a devious man, Will Parrish. I'm a thorough man, Ray Martinez. There's a difference. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. Graham's home. He's been on the phone for an hour. I think he's trying to do damage control. I texted back, too late for that. How are you holding up? Better than expected. Turns out I've been wanting an excuse to leave him for years. This just makes it easier to justify. Dinner tomorrow? We should coordinate our next moves. Absolutely. This is just getting started. I climbed down from the ladder and started packing up my tools. Mrs. Kowalski emerged from her house, ostensibly to check her mail but obviously wanting to talk. "Will, I hope you don't mind me saying, but we heard raised voices. Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine, Mrs. Kowalski. Just some marital issues that are getting resolved. If you need anything, a place to stay, a home-cooked meal, please don't hesitate to ask. We've always thought very highly of you." "I appreciate that. Actually, if you're interested, I have some documentation about Graham Thornton that might interest the neighborhood association. Turns out he's not quite the family man he pretends to be." Mrs. Kowalski's eyes lit up with the kind of interest that made suburban gossip networks so effective. "I'll make sure the right people hear about it," she said. "I'm sure you will." Ray and I finished loading the truck in comfortable silence. As we drove away, I could see Beth in my rearview mirror, standing in the driveway with her phone pressed to her ear, probably calling Graham or her sister or anyone who might help her make sense of how her perfect vacation had turned into a public humiliation. "So what's tomorrow's plan?" Ray asked. "Tomorrow we start phase 3. "Which is? We make sure Graham understands that stealing other people's wives is bad for business." Sophie met me at Malone's pub the next evening, a folder thick with documents and a smile that could have powered half the town. She'd spent the day with her lawyer and an accountant, and the results were better than we'd hoped. "Graham's been very creative with his finances," she said, sliding the folder across the table. "Separate credit cards I didn't know about, a business account he's been using for personal expenses, and some very interesting tax deductions." I opened the folder and whistled low. Hotel receipts, restaurant charges, even jewelry purchases, all claimed as business expenses on Graham's tax returns. "He's been writing off his affair as marketing costs?" "Gets better. Look at page 12. I flipped through the documents until I found what she was talking about. A series of payments to something called Prestige Marketing Solutions, $500 a month for the past 8 months. "What's Prestige Marketing Solutions?" "It doesn't exist. I called the number listed on the invoices. Disconnected. The address is a mailbox service in Hartford." "He's been creating fake businesses to hide money?" "That's what it looks like. My lawyer thinks he's been skimming from his real estate commissions and hiding the money in accounts I don't have access to." I sat back in my chair, processing the implications. This isn't just adultery anymore, this is fraud. Exactly. And here's the beautiful part. Beth's name is on some of these documents. She showed me a bank signature card dated 3 months ago. Beth's handwriting was unmistakable, authorizing her access to one of Graham's hidden accounts. "She's been helping him hide money," I said, "which makes her an accessory to tax fraud. My lawyer says if this goes to court, both of them could face serious legal consequences." I thought about Beth, who'd always been so careful about following rules, filing taxes on time, keeping meticulous records. The idea that she'd risk everything for Graham seemed almost impossible. "Are you sure about this?" Sophie nodded grimly. "I've been married to Graham for 12 years. He's always been a corner cutter, always looking for ways to beat the system. But he's not smart enough to set this up alone. He needed someone with marketing experience, someone who understood business documentation. Someone like Beth. Someone exactly like Beth." My phone buzzed with a text message. "Beth, Will, please call me. We need to discuss this rationally." I showed the message to Sophie, who snorted. "Rationally? After 6 months of lies and fraud?" She's probably panicking. Graham's business is already taking hits from the neighborhood gossip network. Mrs. Patterson called 3 of his recent clients yesterday. What did she tell them? The truth, that Graham presents himself as a family man while conducting affairs with married clients. Sophie's smile was sharp. How did they take it? The Hendersons are considering switching realtors for their investment property. The Yamadas asked for copies of all their paperwork to make sure Graham didn't overcharge them. And the Morrison family is writing a review for his Google listing. What kind of review? I pulled up my phone and found the Google page for Graham's business. The Morrison Review was already posted, 5 paragraphs of detailed disappointment about Graham's lack of professional ethics and deceptive business practices. "This is perfect," Sophie said, reading over my shoulder. "His whole business model depends on referrals and reputation. And we're systematically destroying both." My phone rang. Beth again. This time I answered. "What do you want, Beth?" "I want to come home. I want us to sit down like adults and work through this." "Where are you staying?" A pause. "With Graham." "How's that working out for you?" Another pause, longer this time. "It's complicated." "I bet it is. Graham's wife filed for divorce this morning. His business is hemorrhaging clients. The neighborhood association is asking questions about his professional ethics. Complicated doesn't begin to cover it." "Will, you don't understand. Graham and we didn't plan for this to happen. It just did." "Nothing just happens, Beth. You made choices. You chose to lie to me for months. You chose to use our money for your affair. You chose to help Graham hide assets from his wife." "I didn't." "What are you talking about?" I looked at Sophie, who nodded encouragingly. "Prestige Marketing Solutions, Beth. The fake company you helped Graham create to hide money from Sophie. The bank accounts you have signature authority on. The tax fraud you've been participating in." The silence on the other end stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. "Beth? I don't know what you're talking about." Her voice was small, scared. "Yes, you do. Sophie has all the documentation, bank records, signature cards, tax returns. You're in this up to your neck. Graham said it was just business restructuring. He said it was legal. Graham lied to you, Beth, just like you lied to me. Funny how that works." I could hear her crying now, soft sobs that might have moved me 6 months ago. "What do you want from me, Will?" "I want you to understand that actions have consequences. You and Graham thought you were so clever, sneaking around, using other people's money, lying to everyone who trusted you. Now you get to find out what happens when the truth comes out." "Are you going to turn us in?" I looked at Sophie again. She shook her head slightly. "I don't have to turn you in, Beth. You turned yourselves in the moment you put your name on those bank documents." "What does that mean?" "It means Sophie's lawyer has already notified the IRS about Graham's creative accounting. It means your name is on legal documents connected to tax fraud. It means you need a lawyer, and you need one fast." The line went quiet, except for her breathing. "Will, please, I made a mistake. A huge mistake. But we can fix this, we can—" "No, we can't. You can't unmake the choices you made, Beth. You can't unfake the businesses you helped create. You can't unforge the documents you signed." "I didn't forge anything." "Then you knowingly participated in tax fraud, which is worse." I hung up and turned to Sophie, who was watching me with something like admiration. "Think that got through to her?" "I think she's starting to understand how deep she's in." "Good, because we're just getting started." Sophie opened another section of her folder. "Graham's real estate license comes up for renewal next month. Guess what happens when the state licensing board receives documentation of his ethical violations? He loses his license? He loses his license, his business, and his ability to work in real estate anywhere in Connecticut. How long does that process take? 6 to 8 weeks for the investigation. But here's the beautiful part. Once the investigation starts, his brokerage will probably suspend him pending the outcome. They can't afford to be associated with someone under investigation for fraud." I raised my beer in a toast. "To consequences." Sophie clinked her glass against mine. "To consequences." We spent the next hour planning our next moves. Sophie would continue working with her lawyer to unravel Graham's financial deceptions. I would focus on the social demolition, making sure everyone in our extended network understood exactly what kind of people Beth and Graham really were. "There's one more thing," Sophie said as we prepared to leave. "Graham's been trying to call me all day. He wants to meet, says he can explain everything." "Are you going to meet with him?" "Oh, absolutely. But not alone and not without recording the conversation. Recording? Sophie pulled a small digital recorder from her purse. Connecticut's a one-party consent state. As long as one person in the conversation knows it's being recorded, it's legal. You're more devious than I gave you credit for. 12 years of marriage to Graham taught me to document everything. We parted ways in the parking lot, each of us carrying pieces of the puzzle that would complete Beth and Graham's destruction. As I drove home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: control. For 6 months, Beth and Graham had controlled the narrative, controlled the information, controlled the timeline. They'd made me into a fool, a cuckold, a man so oblivious to his wife's betrayal that he kept paying for her romantic getaways. Now the script was flipped. Now they were the ones scrambling to control damage, trying to explain the unexplainable, attempting to justify the unjustifiable. My phone buzzed with another text from Beth. Graham says you're lying about the legal stuff. He says Sophie is making it up. I texted back, Graham's been lying to you for months, Beth. Why would he start telling the truth now? No response. When I got home, I found Beth's car in my driveway again. She was sitting on the front steps, looking smaller and more defeated than I'd ever seen her. The locks really are changed, she said as I approached. I told you they were. Where am I supposed to sleep tonight? That's not my problem anymore, Beth. You made your choice when you chose Graham. Graham's house is complicated right now. Sophie's there and she's what? Angry? Hurt? Betrayed? Imagine that. Beth stood up, wrapping her arms around herself against the evening chill. Will, I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can... Stop. I held up my hand. Just stop. You didn't make mistakes, Beth. You made choices. Deliberate, calculated, sustained choices over a period of months. You chose to lie to me every single day. You chose to use our money for your affair. You chose to help Graham defraud his wife. I didn't know about the financial stuff. Yes, you did. Your signature is on the documents, Beth. You authorized access to hidden accounts. You can't claim ignorance when there's paperwork proving your involvement. She started crying again, the kind of desperate sobs that come when someone realizes they're truly trapped. What am I supposed to do? You're supposed to call a lawyer. You're supposed to figure out how to explain your involvement in tax fraud to the IRS. You're supposed to deal with the consequences of your choices. Where am I supposed to stay? I looked at her for a long moment. This woman I'd been married to for 15 years, this stranger who'd been lying to me for months. Call your sister, call your parents, call Graham, but you're not staying here. I walked past her to my front door, key in hand. Will, please. I have nowhere to go. You should have thought of that before you decided to vacation with another woman's husband. I went inside and closed the door behind me, leaving Beth alone on my front steps with her choices and their consequences. Through the window, I watched her make a phone call. After a few minutes, she walked back to her car and drove away. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. Graham wants to meet tomorrow morning. Coffee shop on Main Street. Want to be my backup? I texted back, wouldn't miss it. Tomorrow, Graham would try to charm his way out of the hole he'd dug. Tomorrow, he'd discover that charm doesn't work on people who have documentation of your lies. Tomorrow, the consequences would continue. The Main Street Coffee Company was busy enough to provide cover, but quiet enough for conversation. Perfect for what Sophie had planned. I arrived 15 minutes early and took a corner table with clear sightlines to the entrance and the parking lot. Graham's silver BMW pulled up at exactly 10 o'clock, right on time. Through the window, I could see him checking his appearance in the rearview mirror, adjusting his tie, preparing for what he probably thought would be a negotiation. He had no idea he was walking into a confession. Sophie arrived 2 minutes later, her digital recorder already running in her purse and a folder of documents under her arm. She looked composed, professional, like a woman attending a business meeting rather than confronting her cheating husband. Graham stood when he saw her, that practiced smile spreading across his face like he was greeting a potential client. Sophie, thank you for coming. I know this is difficult, but I think we can work through this misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. I had to admire his optimism. Sophie sat down across from him, placing her folder on the table between them. There's no misunderstanding, Graham. I know about Beth. I know about the hotels, the fake business trips, the credit card charges. I know everything. Sophie, listen. What happened with Beth? It wasn't planned. It just happened. These things don't just happen, Graham. Affairs require planning, coordination, lies. Lots of lies. Graham glanced around the coffee shop, probably checking to see if anyone was listening. His gaze passed right over me without recognition. I was just another guy in work clothes, drinking coffee and reading the paper. Okay, you're right. I made mistakes. But Sophie, we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can't fix fraud, Graham. The word hit him like a physical blow. His practiced smile faltered, and for the first time since I'd known him, Graham Thornton looked genuinely worried. What are you talking about? Sophie opened her folder and pulled out the first document, bank statements showing the mysterious monthly payments to Prestige Marketing Solutions. I'm talking about the fake businesses you created to hide money from me. I'm talking about the tax deductions you claimed for your affair expenses. I'm talking about the bank accounts you opened without my knowledge. Graham's face went pale. Sophie, that's just business restructuring. It's perfectly legal. Show me the business license for Prestige Marketing Solutions. What? If it's a legitimate business, there should be a state license, incorporation papers, tax identification numbers. Show me the documentation. Graham's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I don't have that stuff with me. Because it doesn't exist. Because Prestige Marketing Solutions is a fake company you created to hide assets and avoid taxes. That's not, it's complicated. Sophie pulled out another document. This is a signature card for the account connected to Prestige Marketing Solutions. Whose signature is that, Graham? Even from across the coffee shop, I could see Graham's hands shaking as he looked at the paper. That's Beth's signature, he said quietly, which makes her an accessory to whatever fraud you've been committing. Did you tell her what she was signing? I told her it was business paperwork. But you didn't tell her it was for a fake company designed to hide money from your wife? Graham was sweating now, despite the coffee shop's air conditioning. Sophie, you're making this sound worse than it is. Am I? Because my lawyer thinks it sounds like tax fraud, asset concealment, and conspiracy. What do you think the IRS will call it? The IRS? Graham's voice cracked slightly. I filed a complaint yesterday. They're very interested in your creative accounting methods. The silence stretched between them while Graham processed the implications. I could almost see his mind working, trying to find an angle, a way to charm or negotiate his way out of trouble. Sophie, please. If you file complaints, if you involve the government, this will destroy both of us. My business, our house, everything we've built together. Everything we built together. Graham, you've been systematically lying to me and stealing from me for months. You haven't been building anything with me. You've been building a separate life with Beth. It wasn't like that. What was it like? Graham looked around the coffee shop again, his desperation becoming more obvious. It was just, Beth understood me in ways that, we connected on a different level. You connected on a level that required fake businesses and hidden bank accounts? The financial stuff was separate. That was just what, Graham? Just fraud? Just theft? Just a felony? I had to admire Sophie's technique. She was letting Graham talk himself deeper into trouble with every word, and the digital recorder was capturing all of it. Sophie, if we can just work this out between us, without involving lawyers and government agencies, the way you worked out your affair with Beth, behind my back, using my money, lying to my face for months? Graham reached across the table, trying to take Sophie's hand. She pulled away like he was contagious. I know I hurt you. I know I made terrible mistakes. But Sophie, if this becomes public, if there are investigations and court cases, think about what that does to both of us. I am thinking about it, Graham. I'm thinking about how much better my life will be without a lying, cheating, fraudulent husband. What about our house? Our investments? If I lose my real estate license? If my business fails? Then I guess you should have thought about that before you decided to commit fraud to finance your affair. Graham sat back in his chair, finally understanding that charm and negotiation weren't going to work. What do you want from me? Sophie smiled, and it was the coldest expression I'd ever seen on a human face. I want you to understand that choices have consequences, Graham. You chose to betray our marriage. You chose to steal money from our joint accounts. You chose to involve Beth in your fraudulent schemes. Now you get to live with the results of those choices. And what are those results? Sophie stood up, gathering her documents. You'll find out. She walked away, leaving Graham sitting alone at the table with his coffee and his suddenly uncertain future. I waited 5 minutes before following her outside. Graham was still sitting in the coffee shop, staring at nothing, when I passed by the window. Sophie was waiting by her car, the digital recorder in her hand, and a satisfied expression on her face. How did it go? I asked. Better than I hoped. He admitted to the fake business, confirmed Beth's involvement, and basically confessed to everything on tape. Think it'll hold up legally? My lawyer says recorded confessions are very persuasive evidence. My phone buzzed with a text from Beth. Graham says you and Sophie are trying to frame us for something we didn't do. I showed the message to Sophie, who laughed out loud. Frame them? We don't need to frame them. They documented their own crimes. I texted Beth back. Ask Graham about Prestige Marketing Solutions. Ask him about the bank account your name is on. Ask him about the fake business licenses. No immediate response. What's our next move? I asked Sophie. Now we wait. Graham's going to panic, probably make more mistakes. Beth's going to realize how deep she's in and start looking for ways to save herself. Think she'll turn on Graham? I think Beth's going to discover that loyalty is a luxury she can't afford. We parted ways in the parking lot, each of us heading back to our regular lives while Beth and Graham's world continued to crumble. I drove to a job site where my crew was installing new electrical service for a restaurant renovation. Normal work, honest work, the kind of straightforward problem-solving that had built my business and my reputation. Ray met me at the truck, tool belt already in place and a questioning look on his face. How did the coffee meeting go? Graham confessed to everything. Sophie got it all on tape. And Beth? Beth's about to learn that being an accessory to fraud is a serious legal problem. We worked in comfortable silence for the next few hours, running conduit and pulling wire through the restaurant's walls. Physical work that required concentration and skill, the kind of work that reminded me who I really was underneath all the drama and betrayal. My phone rang around noon, Beth's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. What do you want, Beth? Will, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. That's rich, coming from you. Please, this is important. Did Sophie really file a complaint with the IRS? Why don't you ask Graham? He's the one who got you involved in whatever Prestige Marketing Solutions is supposed to be. Graham says it's just a business restructuring. He says Sophie's lying about the legal problems. Beth, your signature is on bank documents for a company that doesn't exist. You authorized access to accounts that were hidden from Graham's wife. What do you think the IRS calls that? Silence. Beth? I didn't know. Graham said it was legitimate business paperwork. He said I was helping him organize his accounts. And you believed him? Why wouldn't I? I trusted him. The irony was so thick I could taste it. You trusted him? Beth, he was lying to his wife about where he was and who he was with. He was using fake business trips to cover your affair, but you trusted him with legal documents? The affair was personal, but business stuff. The affair was funded with money from fraudulent business accounts, Beth. The personal and the business were connected from the beginning. I could hear her crying again. Will, what am I going to do? You're going to get a lawyer, a good one, because Sophie's not bluffing about the IRS, and Graham's not going to protect you when the investigation starts. What do you mean? I mean, when federal agents start asking questions about tax fraud, people tend to look out for themselves first. Graham's going to throw you under the bus to save his own skin. He wouldn't do that. Beth, he's been lying to you for months about the legal implications of what you were signing. What makes you think he'll start protecting you now? The line went quiet, except for her breathing. Will, can we meet? Can we talk about this in person? No. Please, You need a lawyer, Beth. You need someone who can explain federal fraud charges and help you figure out how to minimize your legal exposure. You don't need me. I hung up and went back to work, but my concentration was shot. Ray noticed immediately. Everything okay, boss? Beth's starting to realize how much trouble she's in. Think she'll flip on Graham? I think she's going to do whatever it takes to save herself. And Graham's going to do the same thing. Ray grinned. This is going to get interesting. It already is. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. Graham just called. He wants to meet again. Says he has a proposal. I texted back. What kind of proposal? He wants to make a deal. Thinks he can buy his way out of trouble. Are you going to meet with him? Absolutely. This should be entertaining. I smiled and put my phone away. Graham was about to learn that some problems can't be solved with money or charm. Some consequences can't be negotiated away. Graham's proposal meeting was scheduled for that evening at the same coffee shop, but this time I positioned myself closer, at the table directly behind where they'd sat that morning. The digital recorder in my jacket pocket was Sophie's idea. She wanted backup documentation of whatever Graham was planning. He arrived first, looking haggard and desperate, in a way that expensive clothes couldn't hide. His usual confident swagger had been replaced by the nervous energy of a man who'd finally realized he was in serious trouble. Sophie arrived precisely on time, carrying the same folder of evidence and wearing an expression of professional detachment that would have made any lawyer proud. Graham, she said, sitting down across from him. Sophie, thank you for coming. I know this morning was difficult, but I've been thinking about our situation, and I believe I have a solution that works for everyone. I'm listening. Graham leaned forward, lowering his voice to what he probably thought was a confidential tone. What if I could make the financial irregularities disappear? What if I could restructure everything legitimately, pay any back taxes, make sure all the paperwork is properly filed? You mean, what if you could cover up the fraud after the fact? I mean, what if we could resolve this privately, without involving government agencies or lawyers or public scandals? Sophie's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. Graham, you can't unfake a business that's been operating illegally for months. You can't unforge documents that have already been filed with banks and tax authorities. But if I pay penalties, if I make restitution, to whom? You've been stealing from me, Graham. You've been hiding assets that should have been community property. You've been claiming tax deductions for personal expenses. Who exactly are you planning to make restitution to? Graham's hands were shaking slightly as he reached for his coffee. Sophie, I know I made mistakes. But if we handle this quietly, we can both move on with our lives without destroying everything we've built. Everything we built? Graham, you destroyed everything we built the moment you started lying to me. Okay, yes, I made terrible personal choices. The affair with Beth was wrong and I'm sorry. But the business issues, those can be fixed. Sophie opened her folder and pulled out a thick stack of papers. These are copies of every fraudulent document you created, every fake business expense you claimed, every hidden account you opened. My lawyer estimates you've committed tax fraud totaling more than $50,000 over the past 2 years. Graham's face went white. 50,000? That's impossible. Hotel rooms, restaurant meals, jewelry, travel expenses, all claimed as business deductions for your affairs. Not just with Beth, Graham. My investigation found evidence of at least 2 other women over the past 18 months. I had to admire Sophie's thoroughness. She'd been busy since our last conversation. 2 other women? Graham's voice was barely a whisper. Did you think Beth was special? Did you think she was your one true love? Graham, you're a serial cheater who's been using tax fraud to finance your lifestyle. Graham sat in stunned silence while Sophie continued her methodical destruction of his self-image. So here's my counterproposal, she said. You're going to sign a confession detailing every fraudulent business you created, every fake expense you claimed, and every woman you involved in your schemes. You're going to transfer ownership of all hidden assets to me, and you're going to cooperate fully with the IRS investigation. And if I don't, then I release all of this information to your real estate licensing board, your business partners, your clients, and the local media. Your choice. Graham's desperation was palpable. Sophie, if this becomes public, it destroys both of us. My business fails, we lose the house, our investments become worthless. Your business, Graham. Your investments. I'm filing for divorce, and I'm going to make sure I get everything that's legitimately mine. What about Beth? What happens to her? Sophie's smile was predatory. Beth made her own choices. She can deal with her own consequences. She didn't know about the financial stuff. She just signed papers I told her to sign. Are you saying you defrauded Beth too? That you tricked her into participating in your schemes? Graham realized too late that he was being led into another confession. I mean, she knew it was business paperwork. But you didn't tell her it was for fake businesses designed to hide money from your wife? It's complicated. It's fraud, Graham. And Beth's signature is on the documents, which makes her legally responsible whether she understood what she was signing or not. I could see Graham's mind working, trying to find an angle that would save him without destroying Beth. The loyalty was almost touching, if you ignored the fact that it was built on months of lies and betrayal. What if Beth cooperated with the investigation? What if she provided testimony about how the financial schemes worked? Sophie leaned back in her chair, considering the offer. You mean, what if Beth testified against you in exchange for immunity? I mean, what if we all worked together to resolve this without anyone going to prison? Prison? Sophie's eyebrows rose. Graham, do you think this is serious enough for prison time? The color drained from Graham's face completely. I mean, it's tax issues, right? Civil penalties, fines, that sort of thing. Tax fraud over $50,000 is a felony, Graham. With multiple counts across multiple years, you're looking at potentially serious federal charges. Graham put his head in his hands. This is insane. It started as I was just trying to keep my personal life separate from my business life. By creating fake businesses and hiding money from your wife. I was going to tell you eventually, when the time was right. When would the time have been right, Graham? After you'd stolen $100,000? After you'd moved in with Beth permanently? When exactly were you planning to come clean? Graham had no answer for that. Sophie gathered her papers and stood up. You have 24 hours to decide, Graham. Sign the confession and cooperate with the investigation, or deal with the public exposure and federal charges on your own. What about Beth? What about her? If I cooperate, if I testify about how the financial schemes worked, what happens to her? Sophie paused at the table's edge. That depends on how much she knew and how willing she is to cooperate herself. She didn't know anything. I handled all the financial details. Then she should have no problem explaining that to federal investigators. Sophie walked away, leaving Graham alone with his impossible choices. I waited 10 minutes before following her outside. Graham was still sitting at the table staring at his hands when I left the coffee shop. Sophie was waiting by her car, the digital recorder already transferred to her phone. "How much of that did you get?" she asked. "All of it. Graham just confessed to serial adultery, systematic tax fraud, and involving multiple women in his schemes, including admitting that he deceived Beth about what she was signing. Think that helps her legally?" Sophie considered the question. "It might. If she can prove she was deceived, if she cooperates fully with investigators, she might avoid serious charges. And Graham? Graham's going to prison. The only question is for how long." My phone buzzed with a text from Beth. "Will, I need to see you. Tonight. It's urgent." I showed the message to Sophie, who grinned. "She's panicking. Graham probably called her after our meeting this morning. Think she knows about the other women?" "She's about to find out." I texted Beth back, "Meet me at Malone's pub at 9. Come alone." Her response was immediate. "Thank you. I'll be there." Sophie and I spent another few minutes coordinating our next steps. She would continue working with her lawyer to formalize Graham's confession and cooperation agreement. I would find out exactly how much Beth knew about Graham's broader pattern of fraud and infidelity. "Be careful," Sophie warned. "Beth's desperate, and desperate people make unpredictable choices." "I can handle Beth." Famous last words. I drove home to change clothes and prepare for what would probably be the final conversation of my marriage. 15 years of shared history, reduced to a negotiation about federal crimes and legal consequences. My house felt different now, cleaner, quieter, more like a home than it had in months. Without Beth's constant presence, without the underlying tension of her lies and deceptions, the space had become peaceful again. I poured myself a bourbon and sat in my basement office, looking at the credit card statements that had started this entire chain of events. The romance package charge that had revealed Beth's betrayal seemed almost quaint now, compared to the systematic fraud and multiple affairs we'd uncovered. My phone rang. "Ray." "Boss, you okay? You seemed pretty distracted this afternoon." "I'm fine, Ray. Just dealing with the fallout from Beth's poor choices." "Anything I can help with?" "Actually, yes. If anyone asks, reporters, investigators, whoever, Parish Electric has never had any business relationship with Prestige Marketing Solutions or any of Graham's fake companies." "Got it. We keeping our distance from this mess?" "We're staying completely clean. This is Beth and Graham's problem, not ours." "Good call. See you tomorrow." I finished my bourbon and headed to Malone's pub, for what I expected would be Beth's final attempt to salvage something from the wreckage of her choices. Time to find out exactly how much my wife of 15 years really knew about the man she'd thrown away our marriage for. Beth was already waiting when I arrived at Malone's, hunched over a glass of wine at a corner table, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her usually perfect appearance was disheveled, hair pulled back carelessly, no makeup, clothes that looked like they'd been slept in. I ordered a beer and sat down across from her, noting the way her hands shook slightly as she reached for her wine glass. "You look terrible," I said without preamble. "I feel terrible." Her voice was hoarse, strained. "Will, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." "The truth? That's ironic, coming from you." "Please, this is serious. Did Sophie really find evidence of other women?" I studied her face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. All I saw was fear. "What did Graham tell you?" "He said Sophie was lying, trying to make him look worse than he is. He said there were never any other women, that I was the only one." "And you believed him?" Beth's laugh was bitter, broken. "I don't know what to believe anymore. For months I thought Graham was this honest, caring man who understood me in ways you never did. Now I find out he's been lying about business stuff, hiding money, maybe cheating on me too." "Beth, Graham's been systematically defrauding his wife for at least 2 years. He created fake businesses to hide money and claimed his affairs as tax deductions. Did you really think you were the only woman he was seeing? She started crying. Not the manipulative tears she'd used during our marriage, but the genuine sobs of someone whose world had completely collapsed. I thought he loved me, she whispered. He used you, Beth, just like he used the others. Others? I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots Sophie had shared. Hotel receipts, restaurant charges, jewelry purchases, all claimed as business expenses but clearly for romantic encounters. Sophie's investigation found evidence of at least 3 other women over the past 2 years. You weren't special, Beth. You were just the most recent. Beth stared at the phone screen, her face cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally a kind of broken acceptance. He told me I was different. He said his marriage to Sophie was just a business arrangement, that he'd never felt real love until he met me. He probably told all of them the same thing. The financial stuff, the papers I signed, he really didn't tell me what they were for? According to Graham's own confession this afternoon, he deceived you about the nature of the documents. He admitted to Sophie that you didn't know you were signing papers for fake businesses. Beth looked up sharply. He confessed? Sophie recorded the whole conversation. Graham admitted to tax fraud, to deceiving you about the legal documents, and to having affairs with multiple women. He threw me under the bus? Actually, he tried to protect you, said you were innocent, that he'd tricked you into signing papers you didn't understand. Beth's expression shifted from betrayal to confusion. He protected me? Which creates an interesting legal situation for you. What do you mean? I leaned forward, lowering my voice. Beth, you have a choice to make. You can stick with Graham, claim you knew what you were signing, and face federal fraud charges as his accomplice. Or you can admit he deceived you, cooperate with the investigation, and probably avoid serious legal consequences. But if I testify against Graham? If you tell the truth about Graham, you might save yourself from prison time. The word prison hit her like a physical blow. Her wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor and drawing stares from other patrons. Prison? Will? I never meant for any of this to happen. I was lonely, and Graham was charming, and he made me feel special. Special enough to help him commit federal crimes? I didn't know they were crimes. He said it was just business restructuring, organizing his accounts better. Beth, you're a marketing professional. You understand business documentation. Did you really not question why Graham needed your signature on accounts his wife didn't know about? She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the broken glass on the floor. I questioned it, she said finally. But Graham said Sophie was controlling, that she didn't understand his business needs. He said the accounts were just a way to keep his professional finances separate from their personal money. And you believe that? I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe Graham was this successful, sophisticated man who was being held back by an unsupportive wife. Instead of a serial cheater who was using you to help him steal money. Beth nodded miserably. What am I going to do, Will? You're going to get a lawyer, a good one who specializes in federal criminal defense. You're going to tell them everything, every document you signed, every conversation you had with Graham about his finances, every detail you can remember. And then you're going to cooperate fully with the federal investigation. You're going to testify truthfully about how Graham deceived you, and you're going to hope that's enough to keep you out of prison. What about us? What about our marriage? I looked at her, really looked at her, for what I knew would be the last time as her husband. Our marriage ended the moment you chose Graham over me, Beth. Everything since then has just been paperwork. Will, please. I know I made terrible mistakes, but we had 15 good years together. That has to count for something. It does count for something. It counts as 15 years I wasted trusting someone who was capable of systematic deception. I never lied to you before, Graham. How would I know? If you could lie to me for 6 months about an affair, If you could help another man defraud his wife, how do I know what else you've been lying about? Beth had no answer for that. The divorce papers will be filed tomorrow, I continued. Given your involvement in federal crimes, I don't think you'll be in a position to contest the settlement. You're taking everything? I'm taking what's mine. The house I paid for, the business I built, the life I created while you were playing house with a con man. Beth started crying again, but this time I felt nothing. No sympathy, no regret, no desire to comfort her. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I know you are. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry Graham turned out to be a fraud. You're sorry you're facing federal charges. But you're not sorry you betrayed our marriage, Beth. If Graham had been legitimate, if his schemes had worked, you'd still be lying to me. She couldn't deny it, because we both knew it was true. I stood up, dropping money on the table to cover both our drinks. Get a lawyer, Beth, a good one. And when the federal investigators ask you about Graham's schemes, tell them the truth. All of it. It's your only chance. Will, wait. No, we're done. 15 years of marriage, 6 months of lies, and now federal fraud charges. We're done. I walked away, leaving Beth alone at the table with her broken wine glass and her shattered illusions. Outside, the evening air felt clean and cool. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. Graham signed the confession, full cooperation with the investigation. How did it go with Beth? I texted back, she's broken, ready to testify against Graham to save herself. Think she'll follow through? She doesn't have a choice. It's testify or go to prison. Justice? I looked back at the pub, where Beth was probably still sitting alone, contemplating the wreckage of her choices. Consequences, I texted back. Finally. I drove home to my quiet house, my clean conscience, and my uncertain but honest future. Behind me, Beth and Graham were learning that paradise built on lies always collapses eventually. The text that started it all, "Wish you were here," seemed like ancient history now. Beth had gotten her wish in a way. She was exactly where her choices had led her, and I wouldn't wish that place on anyone. But then again, I hadn't created her situation. She had. 1 forwarded text, 17 missed calls, and 6 months later, the consequences were finally complete. My phone buzzed one last time, a text from an unknown number. This is Beth. I got a lawyer. Thank you for the advice. I'm sorry for everything. I deleted the message without responding. Some apologies come too late. Some consequences can't be undone. Some marriages don't survive the truth. I poured myself a bourbon, sat in my basement office, and began planning the rest of my life, a life built on honesty, integrity, and the hard-learned lesson that trust, once broken, can never be fully repaired. Outside, it started to rain, washing away the last traces of a perfect suburban evening. Inside, I was finally, completely alone. And for the first time in months, that felt exactly right. The reckoning was complete. The story was over. The consequences would last forever.